Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. I am. I bought a bear today. Not a real bear, obviously. That'd be a bit stupid. However, paying good money for a fake, stuffed bear, that shit is perfectly normal. There he is. You're all super jealous, aren't you? Now, despite what you may think, he isn't actually for me. He's for my wife, it's her birthday. Just thought I'd share him with you to make you all extremely jealous. Bear hardware review incoming. Now anyway, let's stop talking about stuffed animals. Let's get on to some Battlefield chat. The purpose of this video is mainly to talk about maps in Battlefield 4. But more specifically, the game modes on each of the maps. And for a change, I'm not asking for more stuff in Battlefield 4, but actually, I'm kind of asking for a bit less. Let me explain. Now, for those of you who remember, back when Battlefield 3 was being promoted, one of the selling points they kept mentioning was that you could play all game modes on every map. Sounds great. Put every game mode on every map, tell us exactly how many combinations of game modes and maps we can have, makes it all sound amazing. Oh my god, I can play this map on Conquest, then play it on Rush, I'm so special. Unfortunately, in theory it works great, in practice it doesn't work so well. I've spoken about this before, but some of the Battlefield 3 maps are clearly designed for one game mode in mind, then of course the other game modes have just been thrown on top, and it doesn't always seem to work. Now, I'm only really including the vanilla maps in this discussion because the DLC maps did introduce game modes of their own, such as Conquest Domination for close quarters, Capture the Flag for endgame, so it'd be unfair to kind of compare those. Let's instead use a better example, or maybe two examples, such as Operation Metro and Dam Van Peek. Let me start by saying though, just because I think they don't work well on a certain game mode, doesn't mean everyone's going to agree. Everyone has different tastes, of course people are going to prefer different maps, different game modes, so just bear that in mind, these are my thoughts alone. In my opinion, Metro and Dam Van work very well on Rush. Yes, they're linear. The video is not really talking about map design specifically, but it's more geared towards game modes available on each map. But that does kind of tie in with map design. Because of the linearity of Metro and Damavad, Rush just tends to work a little bit better. On Conquest, both Damavad and Metro can become an absolute clusterfuck. People will just 64 people and you're playing Conquest on Metro, you just can't get anywhere. It's just so horrible. And that's what it kind of comes down to. It sometimes comes down to the amount of people that are playing on the map, and that's another problem. The game Battlefield is designed to allow 64 players to smash it out with each other on PC. Now if you put 64 players on Caspian Border, Bandar Desert, something like that, fantastic. They're all spread out. It means that you've got plenty of action, but it's not too claustrophobic. It's fantastic. You have put 64 people on, say, Rush, on Grand Bazaar, that's horrible. The first two MCOM points are right next to each other, and one of them is in a tiny, tiny little room the size of a dwarf's cupboard. How on earth are you meant to get into that little room when 64 players are all defending it from either side of the room? It's nonsense. The problem is that if you say 64 players max on Battlefield, every game mode on every map, it sounds appealing, but in reality I just wish it wasn't the case. What I wish is that each map was designed specifically for a game mode. So it had a game mode in mind and that's what it was designed for. Maybe another game mode was trialled on it and it didn't work, then they wouldn't put it in. So let's say you had Dam Van Peek for instance, and they made for Rush, they tried it on Conquest and thought, no, it just doesn't work. So when the game's released, you may have certain maps that are Rush maps, certain maps that are Conquest maps. I think that would work better. If it isn't balanced for the game mode, then just don't include it for the sake of including it. The same goes for player count. Battlefield is all about large maps and vehicles, so have those 64 player maps such as Caspian Border, Dam Van Peek, Striker Karkand, whatever, have those maps. But if you're going to have a smaller map such as Grand Bazaar on Rush, maybe reduce the player count to say 32 or something like that to proper balance out the gameplay. Now that is my thoughts and I know people won't agree with that. What I would just like to see though is Battlefield 4 designed specifically with maps in mind for a certain game mode, and secondary game modes only included on those maps if they actually work, and then they find a good balance of players on that map that works well, and then they limit those players on that particular map. Most people who play Battlefield want large maps, and that won't be affected The large maps will still always have 64 players. What I'm talking about though is the close quarter, more infantry maps on certain game modes. If you're going to have a rush game mode on a tiny little map, I think the player count needs to be reduced. Now I know people won't necessarily agree with me, and it has to be bared in mind that I could go on a less populated server if I chose to. I can search for another server with 32 players. I don't have to jump on a 64 player server on Grand Bazaar Rush. If I do that, then surely it is my own fault, and I agree with that. I agree I can search for whatever player count I want. The reason that I think a lower player count on certain game modes on certain maps would work better is because it gives just a better balanced sort of feeling, you know, for other, especially new players as well. If you play quick play, you don't end up on a server with 64 players doing a meat grinder. But I appreciate the fact that the whole server browser is there for people to decide what they want to do, and you shouldn't maybe limit people from doing what they want to do. People do want to play Operation Metro 64 player. That is true. People do want to do it. You've only got to look at the stats. Metro is one of the most played maps on Battlefield because people sit on it 24/7, 64 player, meat grinding out points, because that's the quickest way to get points. I just think that some thought would go a long way. Having a conquest map, say as Grand Bazaar, works well as a conquest map. Then just deciding, right, we're going to turn it into a rush map now. Where can we put these MCOMs? Here's a tiny little room, let's put them in there. That's not much of a thought process, and I just wish it was thought out that little bit more. So that's my rant over. Let me know if you agree or disagree. This isn't meant to be this is what should happen type video. It's meant to just be my thoughts, and I'd be interested to see if people say no, I want 64 player on Metro, I want 64 player Rush on Grand Bazaar, or whether they agree that maybe it would make it more balanced if game modes were specific to maps and the player count maybe was reduced if it turned out to just not work that well. So as always, like and subscribe if you want to. I'm not going to force you to, but I might set the bear on you, and I will always catch you on the next one.